privacy is the right to make a mistake. There's lots of times in our lives that we come up against what we think are our limits, the best we can do, or the right answer to something, and where the only way to kind of get past those limits is to try something new. And most of the time when you try something new, you fall on your ass. And for me, privacy is the right to think ideas that aren't fully formed, to say things aloud without having everybody know what I said, to go to a place and try a thing without having to commit to it being part of my record forever.
Privacy is actually essential to maintaining human dignity and a sense of self. It's necessary for creative expression, for taking risks, for exploring new avenues of thought, for frankly being a creative, full human being. We need to believe and to know that we have moments and that there are places where we can explore without the risk of being exposed.
Privacy is important to me for all sorts of reasons. I guess one reason is that I feel like it's connected to the freedom of inquiry, that I want to be able to research what I want to research and look into what I want to look into without having to worry that somebody's looking over my shoulder. I think that if you look at the way that other countries that lived under pervasive and unregulated surveillance, the way that the erosion of privacy affected the right of inquiry, the right of the right to know, you can see that there's a real connection between those things. And I value privacy in part because privacy is so closely connected to those other rights.
If you can't be assured of the privacy of your communication with your lawyer, you don't really have a lawyer. If you can't be assured of the privacy of your communication with your spouse, do you really have a spouse? And I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but this is enshrined in half a millennia old law around can you compel a wife to testify against the husband. We've decided as a society that private relationship is so important that it's worth potentially letting guilty people go, because dignity is more important than that incarceration. So privacy is not a small thing. It is a guiding force for how we architect society.
Everyone has something to hide. We have curtains on our windows. We wear clothes. We don't broadcast our salaries or our medications or other private things. Every family has secrets, skeletons in its closet that we don't broadcast to the world. I mean, everyone has secrets.
What would I say if I met someone who said, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear? There are a few answers to this. The first one is that there's a whole realm of things that are not secret but are private, right? I know how you got here and you know how I got here. We understand the act that results in the creation of human beings. Nevertheless, most people don't engage in that act in public. There are things that are private but not secret because we're vulnerable when we do them, or we look ridiculous when we're doing it. So, on the one hand, we all have something that is not something we need to hide, but is nevertheless private. We should hope to keep private. Even things as simple as the things you whisper in your lover's ear late at night are not the things that you want printed on the front page of the newspaper the next day. Not because they're embarrassing, and not because they're silly, and not because no one else has ever said those words before, but because they're personal, and they lose some quality of that personalness when you are compelled to divulge them.
I think that everybody has things that they don't want other people to know. I think that people, for example, often consider their medical history to be personal and private, their financial history to be personal and private. You can have done nothing wrong, but still not want your life to be an open book.
Often when people say, I don't care about my privacy, they're not telling the truth, because if I say to them, oh, you don't? Okay, great, give me your email address and your password, they won't, right? Because they care about their privacy.
It's precisely those people who have nothing to hide, who have to be the ones to stand up and say, I respect privacy, and I know that even though I don't have anything to hide, I still want my privacy protection, because we don't want to live in a state of where everyone's data is freely disclosed to the government, and the government can learn everything about us without any procedural safeguards or judicial safeguards and protections.
There's a remarkable gap between what is illegal and what other people will ostracize you for. And freedom, from my perspective, is the right to live your life like you want to, not like you think everyone else wants you to.
The phones we have in our pockets are basically tracking devices that are collecting data about us and transmitting it to third parties that include online advertising firms, mobile phone companies themselves.
Just by following a map of where I've been over a given week, you can learn a lot about me. You'd certainly learn where I live, which is incredibly private information. You'd learn where I work, which again is very private information. You'd learn where I hang out and potentially who I spend time with, because my friends also have little trackers in their pockets. And then also sort of things that seem benign, like that every Monday night I go to the movies, right? This information, while it seems sort of not so interesting, is potentially very interesting to somebody who wants to rob your house.
I made a choice to have a mobile phone, but to me the question is, what kind of choice did I make? That I think in today's world, the choice between having a mobile phone and not having a mobile phone is very similar to the choice between participating in society and not participating in society. And in many ways, if I choose not to have a mobile device, I've chosen not to participate in society. And that's a much more difficult choice to make, and I would say it's maybe not even a real choice.
The biggest threat to our privacy currently is that we have not translated the Bill of Rights into the digital age.
I think probably the biggest threat comes from programs that are introduced in the name of national security, all sorts of surveillance programs that have been put in place since 9/11, not just in the US but all over the world. Programs that are ostensibly meant to keep us safe, but in fact make us in many ways insecure. I think maybe that's the biggest threat, although there are so many different threats to privacy these days, it's hard to identify the single worst source.
When I first became involved as a privacy activist, I thought of it mainly in terms of government abuse of privacy. But now we can see that corporate abuse of privacy is even worse, because they do it so thoroughly, they do it so perniciously.
I think it's the increasing lack of awareness and a corresponding disregard for people's own individual privacy, in the sense that people are putting more and more of their data online and more of their information online, and are not really manifesting true thought and care when they're doing that. When you turn information over to third parties like Facebook or Twitter or any other social media company, you lose the right to privacy in that material. And in a sense, you give up ownership and control of that data to the company itself. What that does is it creates a situation where it's up to the company to stand up for your privacy rights, because you've lost the ability to do so.
Transparency is one of those terms that can mean lots of things. The transparency that I advocate for is the transparency where institutions that are in a position of power and that notionally represent the people or exist at the public suffrage. So corporations who've been given a corporate charter with privileges that attend to it, governments that act in the people's name, should tell us what they're doing with the power that we've given them. To me, that makes sense.
In order to ensure that our privacy is being respected, we need to know what companies are doing with our data. And the only way we're going to know is if the companies themselves are transparent about not only what types of data they're sending to law enforcement, but how often they're receiving those requests, and also by being transparent to their individual users, by telling those users, just like Twitter has done in the past, about requests made by law enforcement for that information.
Some people have advocated a position of having a transparent society, that we would be better off if everything was transparent. I disagree with this. I think that it's good to have transparency in that, you know, being able to videotape the police beating someone that they've arrested. That is where transparency can be of some benefit to deter the police from doing that. But when it comes to your personal life, I think that we need to be able to protect our personal lives, and so it's not a symmetric thing. And the government is more powerful than individuals, and they can make use of information more effectively because of the difference in power.
I think that requiring transparency of employees who work in low-skilled and semi-skilled jobs or in areas where there's lots of unemployment, it doesn't mean that they'll work better or that you'll get the kind of employee who works best. What you end up with is a race to the bottom where the most desperate employees end up giving the most information about their lives to the greatest detriment of their bargaining position. They end up just screwed, right? They end up with their employers knowing to the nickel how far they can cut their pay before they'll quit.
People at the bottom of the economic scale tend to have less privacy because they are not in a position to pay for as much. They're more likely to make themselves, to avail themselves of free services that are free in terms of monetary price, but not free in terms of trading your privacy to get the service. Wealthy individuals have the resources to protect their privacy more effectively.
His law, privacy is dead, get over it. When he said it, we thought he was being normative. We thought he was saying this is how the world should work. In the years since, it's clear he was being descriptive. It's clear that Scott McNeely was a prophet, that he saw the future, frankly, before all of us did. That barring a dramatic re-architecture of everything we know about technology, privacy is, in fact, if not fully dead, on absolute life support.
And I think in some ways, privacy as we know it, and as mankind has known it for the entire history of civilization, privacy is dead as we know it. So I think moving into the future, the question is what is privacy and how do I have some privacy is a conversation that's important to have for everyone.
I don't think that privacy is dead, but privacy will quickly die unless we come up with a better legal framework to protect it. I think that many of our privacy laws are out of date. They were created in the 1980s, before the internet was even in existence. And other of the laws that are more recent have been watered down over the last 10 years, mainly in the name of national security.
That is a statement that tends to come from people who have a great deal to gain from others' personal information. And I think they would like it to be dead because that gives them the latitude to do all the things that they would like to do with their products and with their work. I think that it's quite clear that people still care about their privacy.
I worry about a future where every website you go to, every link you click, everything you buy at the supermarket, every phone call you make everywhere you go, you actually check yourself. You're like, wait, if this showed up in the New York Times tomorrow, would I still have a job? Because that sort of living is not freedom. That's not a healthy place to be.
Privacy is a thing that we have a hard time pricing, right? The net value of a present-day disclosure against some future catastrophe is really hard for us to calculate in the moment.
There's this notion that people are interested in sharing, right? And that a whole culture has emerged, literally a generation who has known nothing but the ability to share and just sort of publicly broadcast what's going on.
In the digital world, because we share so much online, our notions of what privacy means have shifted a bit. But they haven't shifted so entirely as to make obsolete the importance of privacy to human beings.
that, I think, is the story of this decade. The last 1.5 decades have been about, actually I'd say the last 2 decades have been about, wow, computers are really useful and we can run our economy on them and be significantly more productive. This decade is, how do we deal with the problems that computers have caused without trying to go back, because we ain't going back.